I still remember the sound. That scream from under the floorboards. Not loud at first, more like something trapped trying to decide whether it was safe to exist at all. The kind of sound you don't fully register right away, because your mind keeps trying to explain it away as plumbing, or the house settling, or your imagination doing what it does when the night gets too quiet. But it wasn't that. I can still picture myself standing there, just inside the hallway of that house, holding my breath without realizing it. The air felt wrong in a way I didn't have words for at the time. Not cold, not warm, just heavy. Like the room was holding on to something it refused to let go of. And every second I stayed still, that sound came again, fainter this time, broken up, like someone had covered a mouth that was trying very hard to be heard. I should have left immediately. Any normal person would have turned around, laughed it off later, and convinced themselves it was nothing. But I didn't. I stood there, listening, trying to understand what part of a house makes a sound like that. That was the moment everything shifted, even though I didn't know it yet, because the house belonged to him, the new neighbor. The man who never spoke, never waved, never looked at anyone long enough for you to feel seen. And somehow, standing in his hallway, I realized something that made my stomach tighten. That sound hadn't come from the walls at all. It had come from below. Coastal Maine is one of those places people always describe as peaceful, usually right before they leave it for somewhere louder. I've lived here long enough to know what that really means. Nothing dramatic ever happens. Just small things repeated so often they start to feel normal. Someone's mailbox gets knocked over during winter storms. Somebody's dog learns how to escape every fence in the neighborhood except its own. And everyone pretends they didn't see it happen. Because that's just how things are done here. I'm not a detective, not a journalist, nothing like that. Just an ordinary guy trying to keep life simple. I spend most of my time with a small group of friends at a local community club. It's not as fancy as it sounds. No suits, no serious meetings. Mostly coffee that tastes like it's been reheated too many times. Long talks about weather forecasts like they're breaking news. And grown men arguing over fishing stories that may or may not be true. It's the kind of place where time moves slowly and nobody asks too many personal questions. That's why I never expected anything unusual to happen here. The neighborhood itself always looked harmless from the outside. Tree-lined streets that turn gold in the fall, cold wind rolling in from the coast that makes every evening feel like it ends too early, and rows of houses spaced just far enough apart that you can't really hear your neighbors, but close enough that you always feel like someone might be watching anyway. It's the kind of place people move to when they want quiet lives, or when they're trying to forget louder ones. And then he moved in. The house next to mine had been empty for a while. Nothing special about it. Just one of those homes that blends into the street until suddenly it doesn't. One day a truck showed up. No moving party. No family helping. Just one man unloading everything himself. Like he didn't want anyone to notice he existed at all. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't greet anyone. Didn't even do the polite nod people usually give when they're pretending to be friendly. He just worked in silence, went inside, and stayed there. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People are different. Some are shy, some are private. Some just don't like small talk. I even made a joke about it to my friends at the club, that maybe we finally had a neighbor who understood the concept of minding his business properly. But it didn't take long before the feeling around him stopped being funny, because silence usually has a shape to it. You get used to it, but his silence felt deliberate, like it wasn't absence of sound, but the presence of something refusing to make one. No lights in the windows at odd hours. No movement outside. No trash left out. No signs of normal routine. Just a house that looked lived in, but never lived around. And then the missing children started. At first, nobody connected it to anything. One child gone from a street a few blocks over. Then another from near the coast road. Then another from closer than anyone wanted to admit. People started locking doors earlier, walking in groups, calling names at dusk like that could pull someone back. But what stayed with me wasn't just the reports, it was him. Because through all of it, The new neighbor never reacted. No concern, no curiosity, no glance toward the police cars. Nothing. Just the same stillness, like the world outside his walls wasn't reaching him at all. That was when I started paying attention. And the more I noticed, the more I realized something about him didn't fit into anything I understood. The first time it really started to feel real, it wasn't because of anything I saw. It was because of a pattern nobody wanted to say out loud. A child gone one evening after dusk, then another a few nights later, then another. Each time, the same detail kept repeating in conversations people tried to keep casual in grocery store aisles or outside church steps. It always happened when the light was fading, when the streets were half shadow, half street lamp glow, and always somewhere within the same stretch of neighborhood roads, like something was moving through the area in a slow, deliberate line. At first, the town did what towns always do. People talked, then they corrected themselves. Then they stopped talking altogether unless it was in lowered voices. Rumors spread in fragments. Someone said they saw a van. Someone else swore they heard a child calling from the woods. Another person insisted it was just runaways and bad parenting and nothing more. But none of it held together long enough to become truth. What stayed consistent was fear, and how quickly it learned to hide behind normal conversations. And through all of it, I started noticing something I couldn't unsee. The new neighbor never reacted. Not once. When sirens passed through the street at night, his curtains didn't move. When search teams walked past with flashlights sweeping lawns, he stayed inside. When flyers were taped to poles with missing faces staring out into the neighborhood, there was no sign that he even acknowledged they existed. It was like the entire situation belonged to a different world that didn't reach him. At first, I tried to explain it away. Some people don't get involved. Some people avoid emotional situations. Some people just keep to themselves. I told myself those things because it was easier than thinking about what it might mean if they weren't true. But the more I passed his house, the more that explanation stopped working. There were no normal habits I could recognize. No trash days where anything ever appeared outside. No late night lights flickering on and off. No sound of television through thin walls. Just stillness. The kind that doesn't feel empty, but controlled. That's when curiosity stopped being curiosity. It started turning into something heavier. I remember one evening clearly. The sky had that dull gray color it gets right before full dark in Maine, when a cold wind feels like it's coming straight off the ocean and everything looks slightly too far away. I stood outside for a moment longer than I should have, looking at his house, telling myself I was just being cautious. Then I crossed the line anyway. Not because I thought I would find anything. Not because I was trying to prove something. But because I needed the uncertainty to stop growing in my head. I walked up to his door. For a few seconds, nothing happened. No footsteps. No sound from inside. Just the feeling that I was standing in front of a place that didn't want visitors, even if it had no obvious way of showing it. Then the door opened. He stood there like he had been waiting without moving. No surprise on his face. No confusion. Just a flat, unreadable expression that made it hard to guess what kind of person I was actually dealing with. I forced myself to speak first, trying to sound normal. I mentioned the community club, said something casual about how a lot of us get together once in a while. Nothing serious, just a way to pass time and meet people in the area. I even made a small joke about how half of them only show up for free coffee and pretending they understand fishing stories. I was trying to break whatever silence was between us. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, not the kind of look people give when they're thinking. It was longer than that, like he was deciding something that didn't involve politeness or social rules. For a moment, I almost stepped back. Then, without any change in expression, he said I could come inside. And the way he said it didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like confirmation. That was the first moment I remember thinking I had made a mistake I couldn't easily undo. Inside his house, the first thing that struck me wasn't what I saw, it was what I didn't. No photos on the walls. No scattered shoes by the door. No smell of cooking, no clutter. No signs that anyone actually lived there in the way people normally do. Everything felt arranged with precision, like the space was being maintained for inspection rather than comfort. Even the air felt still in a way that made my steps sound too loud. He didn't offer me a seat. He just stood slightly behind me, watching without saying much as I looked around. I remember thinking I should leave, but politeness kept me moving forward, pretending I wasn't already regretting stepping inside. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was part of the house settling again. A low sound from somewhere beneath the floor. But then it came clearer. Broken, sharp, and unmistakably human. A child scream. It didn't last long. Not even long enough to fully register before it was cut off, like something had been placed over it mid-breath. The kind of silence that follows something like that isn't empty. It feels interrupted. My body reacted before my mind did. I turned toward him immediately. What was that? For the first time since I met him, his expression changed. Not into panic, not into confusion, into something controlled, but tighter, like a mask being held in place by force instead of comfort. He stepped closer, just enough to make the space feel smaller. There's nothing here, he said, but his voice wasn't steady anymore. You need to leave. Now. That shift told me more than anything else had. I didn't argue. I didn't push further. I left. But once I was outside, the air felt different. Like I had carried something out with me that didn't belong in open space. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, trying to convince myself I had misheard it. That stress, rumors, missing children, it was all blending together in my head. Still, I went to the police. I told them everything I saw. The house, the sound, the way he reacted. I tried to be precise, careful, logical. But without proof, it all sounded thin even to me while I was saying it out loud. They asked the usual questions. Was there a recording? Any witnesses? Any physical evidence? I had nothing. Just a memory of a sound no one else could confirm. By the end of it, the response was polite but final. Stress, imagination, fear influencing perception. They told me to stay away from the neighbor and let them handle any official reports if anything else came up. I walked out of that station feeling like I had failed before anything had even started. But the missing children didn't stop. That was the part one, so I made a decision I still can't fully explain even now. One night I went back. I didn't knock this time. I stayed away from the front door entirely and moved around the side of the house, where the darkness felt thicker. I had my phone with me, camera open, telling myself I just needed proof, something real enough that people would have to listen. The wind had changed that night. It wasn't strong, but it didn't feel like it belonged to the neighborhood. Even the trees didn't move the same way. It was as if everything was leaning slightly away from the house. I circled slowly until I found a small opening near the back, a window that wasn't fully covered. I raised my phone. At first, all I saw was movement in a dim space below ground level. Then my eyes adjusted, and what I saw didn't make sense at first. My brain refused to label it correctly. 3 small figures, children, bound tightly, restrained in ways that made my stomach turn. Their mouths were covered. Their eyes were wide, not with noise, but with the kind of silence that comes after fear has already peaked and has nowhere else to go. I remember my hand shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I tried to step back, but I didn't get the chance. A voice came from behind me. Close. Too close. Before I could turn fully, something hit me hard enough to throw my balance off. The phone fell, but the camera kept recording, tilted sideways, capturing flashes of movement that didn't make sense in order. Shadows. Struggling. A figure moving fast toward me. I remember the ground. Cold grass. My breath not working properly. The sound of something hitting again. And then instinct took over. I ran. I don't remember deciding to run. I just did. through the side yard into the street, not looking back long enough to understand what was chasing me or how close it was. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, and the only thing guiding me was the instinct to put distance between myself and that house. I didn't stop until I reached the end of the street, where the lights from other homes finally broke through the dark. Only then did I realize I was still holding my phone, still recording, and whatever was on that footage was enough to change everything that came after. This time they didn't brush me off. Maybe it was the way I looked when I showed up at the station, still out of breath, clothes dirty, hands shaking. Maybe it was the recording. Or maybe it was the fact that 2 other reports had come in that same night from neighbors who finally admitted they'd seen strange movement near the house, but were too afraid to say it out loud. Whatever changed, it was enough. I remember sitting there as officers replayed the footage over and over, not saying much, just watching. The room felt smaller with each second that passed, like the air itself was being compressed by what was on that screen. No one joked this time. No one tried to explain it away. They just stood up, fast. And everything after that moved quickly in a way I'll never forget. Squad cars, flashlights, radios cutting through the night. The kind of silence that happens right before action, when everyone already knows what they might find, but nobody wants to say it first. We went back to the house together. I didn't go inside with them at first. I stayed back as they secured the perimeter, watching from the edge of the street, like I was suddenly no longer part of what was happening. Just someone who had opened a door he couldn't close. Then they entered. At first, it looked like any other search. Rooms cleared, doors opened, commands exchanged through radios. But that changed when they found the basement access. Everything slowed down after that. I remember one officer calling out for backup, not loudly, but in a way that made everyone around him stop moving. That's never a good sign. When I was finally allowed closer, I saw why. Hidden storage areas behind false walls. Lock mechanisms that didn't belong in a normal home. Freezers lined up in a way that felt intentional, not random. Not the kind you use for food in any ordinary sense. And then the evidence. I won't describe everything they pulled out. I don't think I could even if I tried to say it clearly. But what I saw made it impossible to keep thinking of that house as a house. It wasn't a home. It was a place built to hide things from the world. The confirmation came in pieces. Reports, findings, fragments of truth that didn't need to be fully explained to understand what had been happening there. Children who were never found elsewhere. Signs of long-term concealment. Things that connected back to every missing report in ways nobody wanted to say out loud in detail. And the neighbor, he didn't resist much when they brought him out. That was the strangest part. No dramatic struggle, no shouting, just a quiet compliance that didn't match anything I had seen from him before. Like whatever he had been doing behind those walls belonged to a different version of him entirely. The house was sealed off within hours. By the next day, it wasn't just a crime scene. It was the center of something that spread far beyond our neighborhood. Investigators came from outside the town. News crews gathered at a distance. People who had lived next door to it for years stood outside in disbelief, trying to reconcile normal life with what had been uncovered beneath it. And then came the silence from officials. Certain details were never released publicly. Certain parts of the case were marked in ways that suggested more had been found than could be spoken about openly. Whether that was procedure or something else, nobody in the neighborhood ever got a clear answer. As for me, I didn't feel like I had done anything heroic. I just felt different. Like once you see something like that, you don't really go back to being the same version of yourself who didn't know it existed. Now, every time I pass a quiet house at night, I think about how easy it is to assume normal means safe. How often we walk past doors without ever questioning what's behind them. And there's one question I still can't let go of. How many things like that are we living next to without ever realizing it? A pause. Because there isn't a clean ending to something like this. Just distance, time, and the uncomfortable awareness that normal life and something unthinkable can exist side by side without warning. And if you're hearing this now, I need to ask you something. If you lived next door to someone like that, would you have noticed sooner? Or would you have walked right past it like I did, convincing yourself everything was just fine? I still don't have a comforting answer to that.